All right, hey guys, welcome to excuse me, the Daily Word Bible Study. The Bible Study, a plain and simple book by book, chapter by chapter, and verse by verse study through the entire Bible. We are in Acts chapter 12, and this is a transitioning chapter. So we're going to switch over. We're going to maybe phase out is not the best term, but transition in terms of focus. So up until now, we've seen mostly a Jewish focus on the gospel, and after this chapter, we will get into the adventures of Paul. Okay, the ministry of Paul, and then the thrust of the gospel outside of Jerusalem. So, um, so a very interesting story. I'm going to go back. I'm going to start with verse 1 of Peter. Remember it was the apostle James. We did not hear a lot from him. He was probably mentioned more. As a group. In other words, when you hear in the scripture that says the apostles at Jerusalem, and that's more so they're included like in the group. We saw John, we saw Peter, but Peter, James, and John were the main three apostles that Jesus kept with him most of the time. They saw more, heard more. They were with Jesus more, and than the other 9 apostles. So I'm going to start back at chapter 1 so that we can kind of get the picture again and move forward. It says about that time, King Herod cruelly attacked some who belonged to the church, and he killed James, John's brother, with his sword. Excuse me. Now we're going to see a different things are ratcheting up here for persecution in terms of Christians here. You saw Stephen, who was the first believer who was martyred. James is the first apostle that's martyred. Okay, so he says, and when he saw that it pleased the Jews, he proceeded to arrest Peter too during the days of unleavened bread. After the arrest, he put him in prison and assigned 4 squads of 4 soldiers each to guard him, intending to bring him out to the people after the Passover. Now, I think in the King James, this may say Easter, but the proper designation is Passover. And so Peter, and by the way, this is why we have the Passover that we celebrate every spring. It says, so Peter was kept in prison, but prayer was being made earnestly to God for him by the church. Now, I kind of dealt with this in the last study. And I like the King James, okay, when it says prayer was made without ceasing. And I asked the question because I can only ask the question because the Bible does not necessarily give us the answer. In other words, that why did James get killed but Peter didn't? And we don't have a lot of detail, so there's no need to speculate. But the question I was asking was Peter delivered because of the prayer of the church, the collective prayer of the church? Luke takes the time to mention it. Here's my thing: we kind of don't know because the scriptures doesn't really give us. It doesn't really give us the answer. He says, on the night before Herod was to bring him out for execution. Now remember, Herod had intended to execute. Again, let me kind of go back. Remember the kind of political structure you had in Israel at the time. The political structure was that Israel being conquered by Rome, it actually this um, domination actually began under some 500 years before under Nebuchadnezzar, and then so that there have been three. Let's see, Babylon, four. Okay, including Rome, four world dominating kingdoms. Okay, three world dominating kingdoms, and then Israel being passed from the other from one kingdom to the other. So from Babylon to the Median Persians, then to Alexander the Great, and then now under Rome. And then under Rome, you had for them to set Rome set up. There were two sort of governments that kind of ruled under Rome, set up by Rome, and the idea always to keep the people in line. So one was a puppet government. Herod's father was the king, and then when Herod the Great passed, his reign, his dominion was divided among his four sons. One was Herod, the other one was Philip, and then there's a couple of them, I forget their names. They're listed actually in Luke. And then so they were divided. So all of Israel was divided among them. Now, the other ruling kind of group was the Sanhedrin, and they were more the religious, if you want to call them that. So the Pharisees, the Sadducees, they ruled, and all of them under Rome. So Herod, now they're dealing with Herod, and Herod was he wasn't religious, even though he's supposed to be, but he wasn't. He was a very wicked. Him and his brother, they were very wicked and evil people, and as we see, he killed. And so now he's for fun, for fun. Um, he killed James. Now he was going to kill Peter. So he says, on the night Herod was to bring him out for execution, Peter, bound with two chains, was sleeping between the two soldiers, while the sentries in front of the door guarded the prison. Suddenly an angel of the Lord appeared, and a light shone in the cell, striking Peter on the side. He woke him up and said, "Quick, get up." Then the chains fell off his wrists. "Get dressed," the angel told him. "Put on your sandals," and he did so. "Wrap your cloak around you," he told him, "and follow me." So he went out and followed, and he did not know what had took place through the angel. I'm sorry. So he went out and followed. He did not know that what took place through the angel was real, but thought he was seeing a vision. After they passed the first and second guard post, they came to the iron gate that leads into the city, which opened to them by itself. And then as they went outside and passed one street, and immediately the angel left him. And then Peter came to himself and said, "Now I know for certain that the Lord has sent his angel to rescue me from Herod's grasp and from all of the Jewish people from all. I'm sorry. I'm going to read this again. Then Peter came to himself and said, "Now I know for certain the Lord has sent his angel and rescued me from Herod's grasp and from all that the Jewish people expected." Now remember, they were kind of cheering this on too. Herod was going to please the crowd and kill Peter. Now it also kind of shows you what they really felt about the Christians at the time. They wasn't necessarily like. So then he says, and when he realized, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John Mark, where many had assembled and praying. Now, again, we're going to come back to John Mark and Mary. Mary is a very influential woman, seemed to be a wealthy woman who also had church in her house. This is sort of what you had, a lot of wealthy people who came to the Lord. They had, like, I don't know, large house, large room. Sometimes probably, I don't know, can maybe seat 50 people, 100 people, depending. But anyway, but they would have church in their house. And then, of course, John Mark. We're going to get to know him later. He says, when he realized, he went to the house of Mary, the mother of John Mark, where many had assembled and were praying. He knocked at the door in the gateway, and the servant named Rhoda came to answer. She recognized Peter's voice, and because of her joy, she did not open the gate but ran and announced that Peter was standing at the gateway. So you see her shock, right? But look at this. Look at this response. He says, verse 15, you're crazy, they told her. But she kept insisting that it was true. And then they said, it's his angel. Then, but Peter, however, kept knocking, and when they opened the door, they saw him, and they were astounded. Now, I look, this here means I don't believe that they actually believed it. I think they were just saying something just to be saying it. It's his angel. I don't know if someone said, if I really thought that an actual angel was standing outside, wouldn't I bum rush the door to look? So again, they're just kind of saying something here. Um, and then he said, verse 17, motioning to them with his hand to be silent, he explained to them how the Lord had brought him out of the prison. He said, report these things to James and the brothers, he said, and then he departed and went to a different place. Now, if you will remember, the first time they were arrested, and this was under the Pharisees, okay? They went, in fact, the angel actually told them, go to the temple and preach. They had arrested him, then the angel delivered him, and it said, go to the temple and preach. This is under Herod. And the angel sets him free, right? And now Peter gets out of Dodge. Why? Because if he doesn't get out of Dodge, he will be executed. Verse 18. At daylight, there was a great commotion among the soldiers as to what could have happened to Peter. After Herod had searched and did not find him, he interrogated the guards and ordered their execution. So this is some cold-blooded stuff, right? And then it says, then Herod went down from Judea to Caesarea, and he stayed there. Now, you see how, now one thing is, I would not say to feel sorry for the soldiers. Again, a lot of corruption was in government at this time. But Rome, whether it's Rome, Israel, even the Pharisees, they all enjoyed the corruption. Okay, they all enjoyed the corruption. Now, if you will remember, when Jesus was raised from the dead, the Pharisees, again, not Herod, right? Different kind of regime. The Pharisees paid the soldiers to lie and said, we will keep you safe. We will secure you. But say that his followers came and stole his body. But now you see why that was such a big deal. Because notice, they couldn't explain how Peter got away. In other words, the day came, the doors were locked, everybody was standing at their post, but Peter was gone. And they couldn't explain it. And so what happened? Now notice this. So he ordered the whole squad to be executed. That's some cold-blooded stuff. But Herod was cold-blooded. Now, if you want to, I'm not going to go deep into this philosophical question because we don't have all the answers. Why did God then allow Herod to kill all of the soldiers? Like I say, We don't have all the answers. And oftentimes we don't get those answers, but I can tell you there was a lot of corruption. So in other words, God just didn't kill innocent people. Verse 20 says, he had been, now this is Herod, he had been very angry with the Tyrians and Sidonians. Together they presented themselves before him. They won over Blastus, who was charged of the king's bedroom, and through him asked for peace because their country was supplied with food from the king's country. So we see a little politics going on here, okay, that Luke throws his story in, but we see a little politics, how that, again, politics is something. I'm going to tell you something. Politics is evil. One of the sad things today is how the Christian church has gotten entrenched in politics. So anyway, verse 1, so on an appointed day, dressed in his royal robe and seated on his throne, Herod delivered a public address to them. And then the assembled people began to shout, "It is the voice of a God and not a man." Now, it didn't matter how good, how bad the speech was. Notice, in order to appease him, in order to, court his favor, they just shout, "Hey, it's the voice of a God," even if they didn't believe it. Why? Because, okay, we need the food, Herod. And it says, verse 23, at once an angel of the Lord struck him because he did not give glory to God. And he became infected with worms and died. Ouch. Ouch, right? That is a very nasty looking process. It was a brutal way to die, right? Just your insides. Notice he said he became infected with worms, and then died. Wow, just just probably days of just agonizing pain. Look at verse 24. Then God's message flourished and multiplied. And then he says, and after they completed their relief mission, Barnabas and Saul returned to Jerusalem, taking John, who was called Mark. Now, remember, they're coming from Antioch, and we're going to get back to that. That basically, remember, there was a famine. Agabus the prophet had predicted by the Spirit that there would be a famine. And then the Gentile church wanted to give a love offering. And notice he said they sent this by Barnabas and Saul, and so then they returned to Jerusalem. And then notice he said they took John, who was called Mark. And remember, Mark is Mary's son. We're also going to learn that Mark is Barnabas' cousin. And so we're going to see over the next couple of chapters, okay? Remember I said John Mark grew up in Christian royalty. Everybody came through. When people would come to town, they stayed at Mary's house. Mary was very well known among the apostles. Like I say, if you just kind of think about his upbringing, he knew all of the apostles. Now we're going to see something very interesting in the next chapter, however. But so now it says that they took along John Mark. He was sort of their minister, their attendant, apprentice, you might even say. Now we're going to see this later on, how not everyone were saintly. and I use that word as people use it. We're going to see the flaws. Acts is going to give us the flaws of people. And so we're going to see that. And we're going to see that because of John Mark, that he becomes the catalyst of the split between Paul and Barnabas. I'll get more in detail than that later. All right, guys, don't forget to like and share this video and subscribe to BP the Bible Perspective. And as always, if you have a thought or comment, add it to the comment section below. All comments are welcome. I'll see you in the next study.